This lecture is on the topic Democratizing Freedom, and the focus question here is, how did equality become a stronger component of American freedom after the Revolution? The American Revolution took three forms: a struggle for national independence, a phase in a long-term worldwide contest among European empires, and a conflict over what kind of nation the new America would become. Because of its wide property distribution, the absence of a legally established hereditary aristocracy, and its weak established churches, colonial America had the potential to become very democratic. The Revolution released this potential, allowing space for political and social struggles to expand ideas of freedom and challenge traditional power structures and hierarchies. Though the Revolution's leaders were almost all from the American elite, and though the lower classes did not seize power, the idea of liberty animated attacks on both British and domestic American institutions. So did the notion of equality, enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, which caused many in the social order who were deemed inferior, such as women, slaves, and free blacks, servants, and apprentices, to question the authority of their superiors. By the Revolution's end, the authority of male heads of households over women and children, and slave owners over slaves, was intact. For free men, however, the Revolution had very democratic effects, especially in challenging the traditional limitation of political participation to property owners. Democracy at this time meant many things, including direct rule by the population, considered mob rule. Another definition viewed democracy as the condition of primitive societies inappropriate for the complexities of the modern world. But during the Revolution, it came to mean a form of government that served the interests of the people rather than an elite. In the colonies that became states, members of all classes debated universal male suffrage, religious toleration, and even the abolition of slavery. Demands by disenfranchised militiamen for the right to elect their officers and vote in political elections established a precedent for enfranchising veterans. The Revolution's radicalism was most evident in Pennsylvania, where almost all the colonial elite opposed independence, fearing that it would cause the rabble to rule and attack property. Their opposition opened space for pro-independence forces, mainly artisans and the lower class, to organize in extra-legal groups and militias led by men of modest means, such as Thomas Paine and Benjamin Rush, a physician. These men criticized property qualifications for voting and holding office. Shortly after independence, the state adopted a new constitution, abolishing the governor's office, ending property qualifications for holding office, and concentrating power in a one-house legislature elected annually by all men over the age of 21 who paid taxes. It also established public schools and guaranteed freedom of speech and religion. Every state adopted a new constitution during or after the Revolution. Almost all Americans agreed that their state government should be Republican, meaning that their authority should rest on the consent of the governed, and that no king or hereditary aristocracy would be established. But Americans disagreed about the form the Republican government should take to best promote the public good. John Adams and others criticized Pennsylvania's one-house legislature as too radical, and they argued that new constitutions should establish governments reflecting the division of the society between the wealthy, to be represented in the legislature's upper house, and the ordinary, the lower house. A powerful governor and judiciary would check the ability of one class to infringe on the rights of the other. Every state except Pennsylvania, Vermont, and Georgia established two-house legislatures, but only Massachusetts gave its governor the power to veto laws passed by the legislature. Americans preferred a strong legislative branch. Far more controversial were limits on voting and holding office. While conservatives tried to restrict these rights to property owners, arguing that men without property were too dependent on others to have their own judgment, Thomas Paine and other radicals wanted to eliminate traditional social ranks. The new state constitutions reflected the balance of power between conservatives and radicals. In the South, Virginia and Carolina were least democratic, allowing the landed gentry to control politics by retaining property qualifications for voting and allowing the legislature to elect the governor. The more democratic constitutions moved toward making voting an entitlement rather than a privilege, but they did not establish universal male suffrage. Only Vermont did not require voters to own property or pay taxes. Ultimately, the Revolution greatly expanded voting rights. By the 1780s, except for Virginia, Maryland, and New York, a large majority of adult white men met voting requirements. Alone among the states, New Jersey in its constitution allowed all inhabitants with property to vote. This allowed women to vote in that state until the vote there was restricted to white men only in 1807. For women and non-whites, getting the vote would be a much longer process. By the end of the Revolution, freedom and the right to vote and participate in politics had come to mean the same thing.